macabre, gruesome and horrifying, ghastly, of pertaining to, dealing with, or representing death, especially its grimmer or uglier aspect, of or suggestive of the allegorical dance of death. Prepare yourself for these macabre moments.
I am Marie Samuels.
And I'm Kari Cooper.
And welcome to the March episode of Macabre Moments. And,
hi, everyone.
I know these days we're living globally in a cloud of fear. And so Kari and I thought it would be best to distract everybody with...
We're going to scare you the old-fashioned way tonight, folks, with the chilling tale
of a malevolent haunting, yes. So our guest tonight, we are very stoked to have this gentleman with us. He is an extreme haunting survivor, a paranormal researcher of 35 years, researching some of the most notorious locations, such as the Bell Witch property, Amityville Horror House, and many more. He is the webmaster of the official Amityville Horror website, which he created with his good friend George Lutz. He has been featured on Travel Channel's Destination America's
The Haunting.
Haunted. Thank you. And then Sci-Fi featured his family on a documentary called The Haunted Boy. We would like to welcome Mr. Tim Yancey to the show. Tim, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Oh, well, thank you. You guys make me sound amazing.
You are amazing.
Well, it's warranted. It's warranted.
Wow. Well, I appreciate it.
So
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Now, we have done this before, haven't we?
We have. I think Kari said it was about 2015.
I thought it was 2013.
Oh my gosh, it was 7 years ago.
That may be the last time I actually did an official interview. It's been so long.
Oh wow.
Well, and am I your first interview back?
We have done a handful of interviews. You know, there was a time back a few years ago when Trish and I decided we wanted to see kind of what it would like to be normal people rather than paranormal people. And so we kind of stepped out of the public eye. I had a few health scares here and there over the past couple of years, some heart issues and stuff, but I'm doing well. And we have just recently decided to kind of maybe do a few interviews. I get a lot of interview requests. And so we just came back from California, actually, and did a film shoot with some folks for the Discovery Networks out there. And then you guys called. I was like, oh, we have to do this.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we want to talk about your documentary as well a little bit later on in the show. Don't we, Marie?
Oh, yeah. But first, if we could get you to tell us the story of your haunting that you went through yourself.
As a young boy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I haven't, it's been a while since we've even talked about that stuff. They recently did a show a few years ago on the episode of A Haunting, and it was called The Shadow Man.
Yep,
and it was about my family. Yeah, wasn't it cool?
It was great.
It was
I watched
about
it actually 4 times. I just watched it today again. It's really good.
I love it because it seems. Yeah, there's one soundbite of me that they use over and over again. There's 2 things. One, they tell you about 1 million times that my dad was a Korean War veteran, and the other one is me saying I was terrified, like 15 times in the thing. I was like, come on, man. But so my family and I. Back when I was a youngster, I was probably about 6 or 7 years old, I guess, when it started happening. And my brother and I began to notice what we thought was a man hanging around our house outside in the woods.
Can I just interrupt you just 1 second, Tim? Can we set the scene?
Sure.
So you and your family moved it was the late 1960s, and you moved to Lake Worth, Florida, which is southern Florida.
Yeah.
Right? And you moved to a house that was at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by about 2 to 3 miles of forest.
Right, right.
Okay.
My dad had done that on purpose. Now, where we were living before, he was actually living with his mom and dad. When my parents got married, they moved in with mom and dad, kind of thing. And I come from a long line of dysfunctional people, it seems like. And they would come home and things would be missing. Other family relatives and members would come and steal stuff out of the house and take it and sell it, that kind of thing. And he decided that he was going to move from there and leave that area completely. He got a job offer in Florida. And so he moved everybody down. I was born in 1961. And the house that he found was at the end, like you said, of a little dirt road. The dirt road ended at a small lake. And we had a house, and it was 3 rooms. It was like a shotgun-style house. You could walk in the front door and out the back door and never have to turn a corner kind of thing. And it was the living room. We had a small bathroom, and my brother and I's room, and my parents' room, and that was it. So, yeah. And we lived way out in the woods of southern Florida, kind of a swampy, woodsy area. And that's where we were.
And the history of that forest was that it was a haven for escaped slaves and Indians fleeing the Seminole Wars. Was it not?
Yeah. The History Channel, not the History Channel, I'm sorry. A Haunting folks asked me to see if I could do any background investigation on that land. And I lived about 100 yards from what was called Military Trail. Now, Military Trail is called that because it was the actual road that the military used during the Civil War to come down, and it was a part of the Indian Wars. And so there was a lot of fighting. It was at the very end of what they call the Trail of Tears. There was a lot of fighting between Civil War soldiers and the Seminole Indian tribes and the various Indian tribes that lived here. Yeah, that is true.
Okay. So you moved into the house.
Yeah, we moved in, and it didn't seem like for years that anything was going on until I was about 6 or 7 years old. I lived in a very abusive family lifestyle. Dad wasn't the nicest guy in the world, and there was a lot of abuse, a lot of violence towards my mother, towards us. He was one of those guys that couldn't control his hands, if you understand what I'm saying. He was pretty violent. I have some pretty vivid childhood memories that, affect me to this day because of that. And that's the environment that we lived in. And then there was this other thing that began to happen. When I was 6 or 7 years old, my bed was underneath one of our windows in the bedroom. And I would sometimes look out the window at night if I couldn't sleep or, winding down to go to bed. Probably about 30 feet or so. We had a very small backyard, and then there were just woods there. And I began to notice a man that was hanging out in the woods. I would look out the window. Sometimes I think the first thing I remember is seeing a shadow go across the curtain. Somebody walked past the curtain there, and I could see the shadow outlined. And I looked out, didn't see anything. But over time, we would see this man, and he was standing out there in the trees and palmetto thickets. And we could see him moving around out there. And I would call my parents, say, hey, there's a hobo or a bum or there's somebody out there in the woods, and they would go and look for him, couldn't find him, never could find him. But we could hear him. We could hear, the underbrush crackling, things like that going on out there. And time and time again, we would call our parents and say, there's a man out in the back, out past the backyard, and they go out there and look. And it finally got so bad, they were getting annoyed at us, thinking we were just making it up or imagining it. And so we eventually learned just to stop talking about it. We didn't tell him anymore. And I would see that guy standing out there.
And did he have like a face?
No, you wouldn't see any features on him. It was just a solid black outline. It was a silhouette that was in the trees. back there. You couldn't really see any colors at nighttime, so there was no colors of the trees or anything, but you would see the silhouette, the form of what looked exactly like a man.
And just something that was just darker than the night.
Yeah.
That you could just see.
There was...
And how did it make you feel?
There was a great description. Ronald DeFeo said when he testified in court about the Amityville murders that there was a female figure that woke him up that night and that she had black hands. But it wasn't like she was wearing gloves. It was just a dark void, a lack of anything. It was like a black hole kind of look. And that's what this thing looked like, because later on, when it moved inside our house, we could see it up very close. And that's the best description I can give you. It wasn't that it was a solid object. It was a lack of object, if that makes sense. It was just a hole that was there.
So did other family members eventually start seeing this or start believing you for some other reason?
Eventually, over time, I told my brother, and he would come over. He'd crawl over into my bed, and we'd sit there. We'd prop up on our elbows and look out the window, and you could see him. And I go, "Oh, there he is. You see him? Yeah, I see him." You know, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It became something over time. This lasted a couple weeks, I think. And over time, it just became something that was just another thing that was happening. And so there comes a point when things aren't unusual to you anymore. You just accept them for what they are, and there it is. And there came a point when we just, we even stopped looking at it. It was more of an annoyance than anything else, because we get in trouble every time we told our parents about the guy, so we just learned to stop talking about it.
Even after he came inside the house?
Oh, yeah, that was a different story. He eventually moved into the house, and it started affecting my brother Tom. Tom would get up in the middle of the night. Some point during the night, I'd wake up because I'd hear a sound in the room. I'd wake up. It was Tom. Tom be standing there. He'd get up, go over to the bedroom door, open the bedroom door, and walk out. And I'd be like, "What's going on here?" I'd get up and I'd look out there. And Tom would be walking out the front door, walking out into the woods. And I'd have to wake up Mom and Dad and say, "Hey, Tom just walked out of the house," and they'd go get him. And they thought he was sleepwalking kind of thing. He'd be out in the front yard. Sometimes he'd walk out into the woods. The real concern was that he would walk down to the lake at the end of the street there, because it was very close by. And they were scared that he was going to walk and fall in the lake and drown himself. So they would grab him, spin him around, and bring him back to bed. That went on for some time. Eventually, they put these little hooks up at the top of the door with a little eyelet and a hook that goes in it. They put those in the front and the back door. And Tom would get up, and he would grab a broomstick, and he'd reach up with a broomstick and pop that little hook out, and he'd go outside. Yeah, and he wouldn't have any memory of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Wow.
I was going to ask that.
Oh,
right?
My God, that is freaky.
Yeah.
No memory.
He would do that, and then, they'd put chairs in front of the door, and he'd crawl under them and go out. He was getting out there, So what they finally decided to do, because he kept going out there, this was almost every night, every other night kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And when you got to get up and work the next morning, 6 a.m., as my dad had to, it can be really frustrating. So what he did is he took a lock, a regular doorknob, like a doorknob to your house. He reversed it so that he could lock us in the room. And he had a key, and he would lock that door, and we'd be locked in for the night. Mom would come in, make sure we were all good. We used the bathroom, and then, boop, door would shut, and he would lock us in, and we couldn't get out. That was the only way to keep Tom in. He'd wake up at night, and he'd go over and start working that doorknob, working that handle, twisting it, trying to get out, and he couldn't get out. That went on for a couple of nights. And I'd tell Tom, go to bed. He'd look over at me just like he was awake, but he never said anything to me, And after a couple of nights of this, I was laying in bed and I'm watching him, kind of half asleep, eyes kind of closed. I'd open them once in a while, just look and see, yep, he's still there. And I heard another sound. I looked over, our closet door started to open. The doorknob turned. It opened and slowly opened, wide open. Tom walked over. He walked into the closet. He stood there, and the door shut behind him.
Oh.
And yeah, I flipped out. That gives me goosebumps to talk about it to this day, and so I started screaming, hollering, Mom, Dad, what's going on? Tom's in the closet. And like, yeah, so he's in the closet. What's your problem? Because they knew he sleptwalked, and they thought he just
Sleptwalked in,
gotten in there and got, yeah. And so that kept going. What happens with that, when you keep annoying your parents over time about stuff that's going on, they're not really concerned about it. They're getting mad.
Mm-hmm.
You learn not to talk about it. You don't say anything about it,
Yeah, no, because you don't want to.
And so that's what would happen.
I can relate.
Yeah, and you're already in a dysfunctional situation where you're going to get the crap slapped out of you, or you're going to get a beating, or there's going to be a repercussion, a consequence for waking up mom and dad. So it better be for a good reason. So every couple of nights or so, Tom would get up, the door would open, he'd walk in there, and the door would shut behind him. And I could hear him talking to somebody in there. There was a conversation going on. And it wasn't just his voice. There were two voices in there. I can't explain to you.
Voices. Did you hear that, Marie?
Huh?
So
yeah, there were two distinct voices.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
What did it sound like?
What the conversation was, I couldn't really tell. It was across the room on his side of the room. Our room was probably 10 foot, 12 foot, 15 foot away. But behind that muffled door, you could just hear muffled talking. And sometimes you could make out a few words. But even Tom, later on, he did an interview for Warner Brothers before he passed away. And he said what the conversation was, he doesn't remember. But he did remember that the reason he could see that guy in there was because he had red eyes. He had red glowing eyes. And what he would do is he'd pick up toys, because our toy chest, our toy box was in that closet, and he'd pick up toys and hand them to him. And there was a conversation that would happen in there. And I don't remember, that's a cloud in my mind what it was, but I remember just laying in bed under the covers, scared to move, because if you move, that's when the monster is going to grab you, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so I'd just be as still as I could, laying in there sweating to death, scared to death. But you don't tell mom and dad, because
it just is
easier. You can't tell mom and dad, because that has consequences too.
Yeah.
So not only were you terrified, you were powerless.
Yeah.
There was nobody coming to help you.
Pretty much. And that's what it was. And there were nights when I would just sleep through it. When something happens over and over and over again, it conditions you, and you become kind of used to it over time. Especially as a kid, you just rationalize it as it's just something that's happening in your home. So I did that.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry?
I said go. I was interrupting you, so I said go ahead.
Oh, okay. There's a little bit of a delay on my end, so I'm sorry if it's a little awkward. But, that went on for some time, a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And then my parents totally not believing this. You don't say anything to them because they're upset and mad. I mean, we're locked in. There's no getting out, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, what do you do with that? And I think the first time they started to realize something was going on, I remember it clicked for my mom, because whatever it was that was coming into our house, it started bringing stuff in with it. Pine cones would appear and just fall into the bed. Rocks. We had roaches. In Florida, they had these big things called palmetto bugs, and it's a cockroach that's about 1.5 inches long. They're huge, giant. Yeah, and they're creepy, and I hate them, and to this day. And those things would come in and drop on the bed. It seemed like they were falling from like about 6 feet above the bed. It'd be rocks, pine cones, twigs, bugs, lizards of all things. You'd be laying in bed, and all of a sudden something hit you in the face and take off running across your face. Lizards, palmetto bugs. It was bringing it was bringing little toys in and just dropping them off. I got no way to explain it, and I would freak out, man. Excuse me.
Not?
And yeah, and so at that point, you do nothing but panic and start screaming and yelling, and here come mom and dad again.
Yep.
Unlock the door. What's going on in here? And they finally got it, especially my mom, I think, because it didn't make sense to her. Well, these guys aren't making this up. Here's all this stuff in the bed. I mean, you'd have 5 or 6 rocks laying in there, some twigs, a couple of sticks.
There's no way you can get out to go get them.
Doors are locked.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so she started to realize, wait, something is going on here. Tom's up every night. They're not hearing this conversation. I am, but they know he's in there because sometimes he'd be asleep in there in the morning. You know, he'd be laying in the closet with the door shut. And then that stuff was going on. And I don't know what was happening for them on their side of the house, but for us, you know, that's what was going on. And so she started to piece it together a little bit. I had an incident that really scared me. There was nobody else around, you know, it was me and my brother, and we played in the woods a lot. We'd go out there and build forts and stuff. And my dad had built us a tree fort out there. And so I was going out there one time. I had not been there the whole summer because a possum, big old possum, had died out there, and it stunk bad. So we had like avoided that whole area for the whole summer. And finally I was making my way back over there by myself. It was afternoon. And up in a pine tree, the whole top of this pine tree started rocking. I was like, what? You know, and I'm watching it, and it's just shaking. It don't make any sense because pine trees aren't real thick. They don't have thick leaves and stuff, a lot of branches, you know, but you can see right through the things. And the whole top of this tree is rocking, man. And it scared me. I kind of dropped down onto one knee. I was like, what's going on? And it steadied itself. And then I could watch pieces of bark popping off of the tree, like something was sliding down it and it was knocking bark off of it. And the branches from the top down to the bottom, I could see the branches twisting and shaking and stuff. Something was in the tree and it was coming down to the ground. And it was climbing down through that tree. And I couldn't see it. I don't have any way to explain it. I could see the tree reacting. I could see the bark popping off of the tree. I could see a weight hit the branch, and then it would spring back up like something had jumped off of it onto the next branch. But my eyes could not see what it was. Yeah. That's the only way. Yeah, that's the only way I can explain it. I could not see what it was.
It makes me think of Predator when they're right in the jungle. And
very, very similar to that. There was no silhouette. There was nothing. It was completely invisible. All I could see was a tree reacting. This thing hit that bottom branch. It ran out to the end of the branch because I could see the limb get lower, 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 and then spring back up. And that was it.
That's creepy. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what happened. I remember it to this day. It was a long branch. And that thing just went lower, 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 spring back up. And whatever was hitting the grass, and now it's walking towards me. I could see the grass parting, and I took off. That was enough for me. When it hit the ground, I hauled butt as quick as I could. My little 7-year-old legs could carry me, and I took off running. I could hear it behind me. Running through the woods. It was coming behind me. Never touched me, never did any of that, but I'm flipping out. And I hit our backyard going about 100 miles an hour, ran in the house, grabbed Mom, screaming my lungs. I was losing my cookies. And she believed me. I got nothing else. She believed me. Finally, you know, and I mean, it makes me emotional right now to even say it. She finally believed me, you know? And I was like, oh, wow.
Relief,
and so,
right?
Yeah, next thing I know, and I'm piecing this together in a timeline as best as I can, because some of that stuff's even a trick in my mind now. We started going to the library here in Green Acres City. They had a little public library that was about the size of a backyard shed. It was like 16 feet by 10 feet. And you go in there and they had books and stuff. And she would look for books on ghosts. And back then, the only people that were out and being published, it's not like it is now, was Ed and Lorraine Warren. And there was a new guy called Hans Holzer. And he was kind of new in the paranormal field. Nobody had really heard much of him too much yet, but he had started to publish some books. And we got a hold of a book called The Amityville Horror. And I think that really resonated because I read it later on when I was like 13 or 14 years old. I read that book, and it rang so true for us that we tried to get in contact with that family and through Prentice Hall, and we did. And George contacted me back, and I was like, "Wow, really? Look at this!" And so that's when we started. That's how I struck up a friendship with George and the Lutz family, was through that venue.
I am noticing some, like you mentioned the woman with the black hands and Ronnie DeFeo. And again, also with movement in the middle of the night and not remembering and having a conversation.
Right.
It all resonates with the Amityville horror case. More importantly, the DeFeo case.
Yeah. There's a lot of commonalities that happen, in violent hauntings in particular. There's a lot of commonalities that occur. We know anybody in any horror movie, motion picture you've ever seen, from The Conjuring to Annabelle to Amityville to the Union Screaming, we know all of them because we all traveled back in the heyday, in the frenzy of everybody loving paranormal phenomenon. We were all going out doing conferences and hanging together and going to this event and that event. We had opportunities to talk to each other, and we began to, through those discussions, I began to notice a lot of commonalities that were happening there. A lot of catalysts. What happened to you, kind of thing. Hey, wow, that happened to me too. Did you ever hear a loud boom in the middle of the night? Yeah, the boom. That kind of stuff. So we also, through that, began to identify stuff, tools, empowerment techniques, and things that we did separately from each other, not even knowing, but we were all doing it to alleviate hauntings and things that were happening that we didn't understand. There are tools of empowerment that are out there that families can use to kind of keep this stuff at bay as well. And so that was something really, really great for us as a family that came out of meeting George and talking to that family, and Stephen LaChance, and just all of those folks that are out there that have experienced this stuff.
I think I saw a video with a lot of you at the convention.
Yeah. When Ghost Hunters came out. Yeah, when Ghost Hunters came out, Jason and Grant, man, they lit the fuse. And we met them for the first time at Penn State University at a thing called UnivCon. Ryan Buell, who was the head of Paranormal Research Society or something like that. I think that's it, He did a show called Paranormal State. Well, he was genuinely interested in this stuff, and he would host these big paranormal conferences. I think he was maybe one of the first ones to do it like on a grand scale, like in a big scale. And he would have Ed and Lorraine Warren come down, John Zaffis, Lou Gentili, he had George there, he had me there, anybody who was involved in the field at the time. And we would come down there and just, have a weekend of exploration and classes and stuff. And Jason and Grant were there with their society, and they would teach the classes, the ghost hunting classes during the day. And that was really cool to meet them at that level before they had really become famous and stuff. And they were serious about this stuff. I mean, they were dedicated to it. And so that's how we met them. But in all of the conferences and conventions, that was such a blessing because we got to get together as a group and talk about things that weren't blinky lights and EMF detectors and stuff. We talked about stuff like faith and spirit and love and laughter and all of that stuff that had been missing in our lives so long that created all this dysfunction. And once we introduced it or reintroduced it back into our lives and into our homes and our families, guess what? All this haunting stuff kind of went away. We weren't feeding it so much. So that was something that was of tremendous value to me and my family that came from all of those folks.
So it's almost like a survivor group, you know?
Very much so. Yeah.
It's survivors.
It's like rehab for haunting survivors.
It's like AA.
Haunted. I was going to say Haunted Anonymous. Yeah. HA.
Yeah.
HA.
Yeah. HA.
You said that you learned some tools for protection, and that you mentioned that everybody was kind of doing the same thing. What can you tell us what they were? What they are?
Yeah, let's transition a little bit out of my story and talk about some of that stuff. One of the things that happened, and one of the catalysts that happened to our family that I think brought this in, there's always an energy source that seems to attract this violent and malevolent type of entities into your home. There's something that's feeding them. There's something that attracts their attention. In my case, it was a dysfunctional family environment. One of my first childhood memories, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. First childhood memory that I have when you think back to those earliest memories that you have is us sitting around a table, kitchen, dinner time. My brother, I look over and my brother's hands are trembling. They're just shaking because he had gotten in trouble in school that day. I was 4 or 5 years old. I wasn't going to school, but he got into a fight or something happened at school that day, and the teacher sent a letter home. And my dad read it, and he says, when we get done with dinner, boy, I'm going to beat your ass. And so he's sitting there trembling, and my dad's just staring at him. And my dad at the time was one of those guys that could really mess with you psychologically. Once he said that, now you got to go through dinner, and he's going to let it sit there and simmer for a while. Mm-hmm. And he's going to look at you with those eyes and that face. And now you got to get through dinner, 20, 30 minutes, knowing you're going to get your butt whooped. And now he's going to let it simmer for a while, let it sink in. So my brother's hands are just trembling and they're shaking. And he went to pick up a glass of milk that was on the table and try to drink it. His hands were shaking so bad he dropped it and he spilled it all over the table. And my dad went crazy. And I'm not going to say what he said. He jumped up from the table, chair goes flying back. He comes around the table. My mom tries to stop him. She gets pushed into the refrigerator. He picks Tom up, 7 years old, picks him up, raises him up over his head, slams him into the concrete wall behind his chair, and Tom falls unconscious onto the floor.
Oh my
He's
gosh.
out.
Oh my
My mom comes at my dad like a caged tiger and just jumps on him. Before she could get to him, he spins around, picks up Tom's chair, and smashes her with Tom's chair. And I get up and scream and run into my room and go into the bed. That's my first childhood memory of our house and our family environment. That's how it was. When you have that type of dysfunction, that type of anger, resentment, rage, negative energy in a home, it's going to attract some bad stuff to you. There's just no way that it's not. George Lutz moves into a house where there had been 6 murders committed. And that family was telling people that house was haunted before the Lutzes ever moved into it. Ronald DeFeo testified. There are statements out there and recordings of him saying there's people screaming in that house in the middle of the night, objects moving around, paintings that were on the first floor going up to the second or third floor, all kinds of stuff, ghosts running around the house, all that stuff was going on. Ronald DeFeo Sr. went to Canada 6 months before those murders happened. He knew something was wrong with his house. He went to Canada and he had statues brought back of the Virgin Mary, of different saints, different Catholic saints. And people would come out of their houses in Amityville and look over and see him in the morning praying a rosary to those statues. People say, "What's going on?" He said, "I got the devil on my back." Ronald DeFeo Jr. testified in court that there were entities walking around with him that night, telling him to commit the murders. It's that rage, that negative energy. Ronald DeFeo was the same way with his family.
Right. I was going to.
There are stories of them sitting around.
Very dysfunctional. Very heavy-handed.
Yeah. He punched his wife, Louise DeFeo, at the top of the stairs. She was coming up the basement. He said, "God, can we ever get any peace and quiet around here?" Walked over, punched her right in the face, knocked her down the stairs, slammed the door and says, "Now maybe I can eat in peace." That's the kind of stuff was going on in his house. You had the Lutzes move in, and it was a new marriage.
A mixed family.
You talk to the kids. Yeah, you talk to the kids, Chris and Danny, they hated George Lutz. They hated him.
Yeah.
Here's this guy coming in now. He's trying to act like dad. They moved into a house where they knew there were murders that had happened. They're going to school and people talking about their witches and devils and they're living in that murder house and this and that. They had a horrible childhood. There are rumors. Well, I'm not going to say it's rumors. Chris and Danny said that George Lutz was abusive to them.
Yeah.
In conversations I had with George, he denied that. But if you listen to the Art Bell interview that he did, it's clear that there were times when he felt maybe he was a little out of control. So I don't know what happened there, but I know there was dysfunction in that house. Yeah. Stephen LaChance, the Union Screaming House, moved into that house. His wife left him, took every penny he had, said, "I'm out of here, see ya," left him with the kids. And now they're living in a house that they just moved into with all kinds of dysfunction, anxiety, depression, going through a breakup in a relationship can be really tough. And so in every instance, the commonality was negative energy in the home. I go to houses. Trish and I will go and investigate houses now. There's not even any pictures on the walls. It's just blank and neutral and, horrible situations that they're going through. The husband's not working, this or that. There's always something that creates that negative energy in the environment. And when that's present in a location, guess what? It doesn't happen to everybody. I mean, everybody has crappy lives. Everybody had a crappy childhood. So why I got picked and you didn't, I don't know. But it seems like that's a catalyst for it.
Well,
I had a pretty good childhood. Like, I wasn't dealing with what you were dealing with, so it doesn't surprise me that that would have been,
Well, it's a wonder. My brother, to the day he passed away, I think was really struggling to get out from under a lot of the stuff that happened to us. I remember laying in bed one night and, one of the other things that would happen to us, and this is a slow progression of things that happens over time. It just keeps escalating. But it was like you took your hands and you just raked your nails down your body, across the rib cage, across the stomach, across the face. The thing that really got me, I was very ticklish, and this thing would rake its claws or nails or whatever. It felt like a hand with fingernails would just rake down the bottom of your feet, the soles of your feet. And oh my God, it would send me flying. And I remember one night I got up just trying to get away from it, threw the sheets off, screaming, ran across the room, just trying to get away. I didn't even know where I was going. I was just running. And I hit the wall and broke both of my collarbones that night. So I ended up in the emergency room, and I can recall my dad explaining that the cat was laying on my bed and its tail was flicking and that it was tickling me. And so I fell out of bed, and that's how I broke my collarbones. But the only problem with that was that we didn't have a cat. So, it just becomes one thing after another, and this thing just feeds off of that negative energy, man. I am convinced of that,
How did you rectify the situation, or did you just have to move? Was it location, or?
we did move at one time. One of the things it didn't translate well into a television show, but we did move from that house. We moved to another house a few miles away, and whatever it was, the house wasn't haunted. We were. It followed us.
Yeah.
It followed us to the next house. More stuff happening, more bangings, more doors slamming, chairs spinning around, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So how did
And then
you
what?
get,
And then
how did you get rid of it? Did you was it George Lutz and you were, after you got in contact with him?
It was
Or did you
a
just write it
process
out?
that took years. No. There's a lot of work that has to go into that. And a whole lot of steps you have to take. It's funny we said Hauntings Anonymous, but it's very similar to an addiction program. It's a series of steps that you have to take to get back to a place of balance, a place of center in your life. And for us, it started off that way. And I think George was in a place where he was willing to be very patient with me in explaining this stuff. I had moved out of my house. As soon as my brother and I were old enough to get out of that house, we were gone.
Yeah.
And I can remember there was a final straw. Something happened. I don't remember what it was, but I just walked out of the house. And I walked a couple of miles to a park. And the first night I slept on a park bench. And I said, I'm done. I am not going back to that house. And the mosquitoes were so horrible. I said, well, I ain't staying on this park bench. That's for damn sure. And so I started couch surfing, man. I lived at friends' houses. I lived on back porches, front porches. I lived in my car for a while. Wherever I was better than being in that house. And so what happened for me over time is I distanced myself from it. I got away from it. It wasn't affecting me at that point. It had focused its attention on my mom. I would come home every once in a while just to check in. How you doing? What's going on? And she would tell me a story of something walking around upstairs. We had a 2-story house at that point. And well, there were footsteps last night walking around upstairs. She was at the kitchen table, hearing the door open at the top of the stairs. Nobody's in the house but her. Footsteps coming down. And she said, Tim, is that you? Are you here? And the footsteps stopped. And she got a real creepy feeling about it. And she got up and ran into her bedroom. At that point, as she started to run for that door and slam that door shut, whatever it was come running down the stairs. She could hear those footsteps. Bam, 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 bam. It sounded like the whole house, she said, was being torn apart. She could hear the TV break. Glass smashing in the kitchen. Glasses just coming out of the cupboard, smashing in the kitchen. The whole time this thing is pounding on her bedroom door. And the whole house is sounding like it's being destroyed. And she started to call 911. And it stopped. Everything just stopped. It became real quiet and still. And she waited for a few minutes, actually. She opened the door and looked. The house was fine, but it had been that sound. There was nothing in the house that was bothered, nothing moved, nothing destroyed, nothing touched, but that sound had happened and she had heard it. So that's the kind of stuff that happens. And at some point after that, probably a week or two, and I had met Trish, and I was living at Trish's house at that point. We decided I can't leave her there. And so we came over, we got my mom, we locked up the house, we brought her over to live with us, and that house sat vacant for 1.5 years. Completely empty. What do you do with a house you can't live in, you know? It would, meaning the house, it would call 911. My neighbor would call me and go, hey, you better get over here. There's police all over your house. Like, what are you talking about? He said, there's like 6 cop cars in the front of your house. And we would come over and they'd say, well, we got a call from 911 here. And it was a hang up. We didn't even have phones in the house. They had been disconnected.
Crazy.
But something was calling 911. They would hear my next door neighbor, Dorothy, would come over and tell me about seeing a guy standing in our backyard trying to look in our windows. Just all kinds of things that were happening there. So we abandoned. My house is currently valued at about $300,000, and we couldn't live in it. It was totally abandoned. We couldn't rent it, couldn't live in it for almost a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. My mom passed away in 2009, and we had to make a decision. What are we going to do with this house? My brother was still alive, and it was our house to figure out what to do now, kind of a 50-50 thing. At some point, Trish and I just got mad, and we said, you know what? This stops here, and it stops now. Trish had never experienced paranormal phenomenon until I moved into her house, and then her house started going crazy. We would come back from a date or something, you know, we go out to the movies, come back, we'd open the door, and you would hear voices talking and arguing in the house, and there's nobody there. We're like, oh crap, you know, somebody in our house. And I go, nah, Trish, let me tell you something. And I sat down and I told her our story and our history. And at first she looked at me like I was nuts, but stuff started happening at that house. My mom and her got into an argument one time. My mom was so mad. I remember her standing in the kitchen of that house and the light bulb exploding over the top of her head and sparks coming out of the electrical outlets in the kitchen. That's the kind of energy that was there. I kid you not. Trish will tell you to this day about her having this argument and my mom saying to her, we were just fine until you showed up, and then you ruined everything. And boom, sparks coming out of the outlets. Yeah.
Wow.
That's the kind of energy
that's impressive.
that you can deal with. Yeah. What do you do with that? And I'm just trying to, you know, but Trish was raised in a religious community called Unity Worldwide Ministries. And she's very religious, very spiritual by nature, very faithful. And she began to blend some of that in with my family, you know, that started to meld in, and it began to take effect. And there were little ripples of things that she would say, and little just golden nuggets of phrases and sayings and imageries and her attitude and stuff that really began to bend the way that I look at this stuff. And I don't know. You asked how I alleviated it. I came to the realization that we got to stop using grandiose verbiage like demons and demonic this, and there's a 4th level portal to hell in your basement, and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. I have learned to become just pretty much a simple person. And for me, the phrase that works for me is a parasite. When I go in and I talk to people in their homes, if I conjure up the image of a big horned beastie monster with a pitchfork and a tail, and this thing's in your house and it's going to kill your family, and well, what good is that? You know, it's something that's a little bit too overwhelming to deal with. But if you kind of peel the layers there and you just tell them, look, you have a parasite. There's bad energy in the home. There's a dysfunctional family lifestyle, or there's a situation. And sometimes it's just the property. Sometimes it's just something that happened on the property a long time ago you're not even connected with, that can create negative energy in a space or a location. That's going to attract things to it. And if you describe it as a parasite, as something that moves in, it makes a connection with the family or the property. It feeds off of all of the negative energy that's in there. And when it needs a little bit more negative energy, it ramps it up. It creates all the conditions necessary for its own survival. More bangings, more fear-based scenarios that are happening in that home.
Yeah, the terrorizing.
Yeah, and that's what it's doing. It's ramping up the energy in there. More fear. People begin to isolate themselves. You start to think you're crazy. Well, you know, my family, we hated each other. We were in opposite ends of the houses as far as we could get away from each other with the doors shut. And that creates a scenario. It kind of blurs the lines of reality. if you will, where it's not suddenly so unusual that something's banging on the wall, or you wake up at night and there's a shadow, over by the door, or something spinning around or rocking or moving. There were so many times that happened to us.
Right.
And at some point, you got to say, this stops here and this stops now.
Right.
So we...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
You
Why
first.
don't you go ahead?
I got to catch my breath. I've been talking so long.
Why don't you guys go ahead?
I was going to say, so at some point after you read the Amityville Horror, you contacted George Lutz. The two of you became friends.
Yeah.
Did he confide into you any insight into the 28 days that the family suffered in the Amityville Horror house?
Yeah, we talked a lot about that. Private conversations that we would have, it got to a point where we were traveling around so much working with families. Because one of the things he liked to do is he would go to a conference or an appearance. Now, you got to remember that family, once it came out, oh, this is a big hoax and it's all BS, that family kind of quietly stepped out of the public eye. Nobody heard from them for 25, 28 years or so. And the last few years of George's life, he started to make connections with crazy people like me and other folks, and he started to kind of step out there a little bit and do presentations. And he would do little lectures here or there. He'd go to a paranormal conference, that kind of thing. And he started to talk about this stuff. And we would often just split a hotel room, because it's really expensive to do this. People think we make lots of money doing this, and we don't. Usually it costs me for me to go to a conference costs about $1,500 out of my pocket, because they don't pay you. They don't put you in a hotel room. Sometimes if you're really lucky, they'll pay for a hotel room. You got to fly to get there, all of that kind of stuff. You got to take time off of work. And if it's two of you, like Trish and I, it can get really expensive. So George and I, we would split a hotel room, and it'd have 2 beds in it. And, we just hang out. And he would occasionally, I would fire up a tape recorder and we'd start talking about Amityville. And he told me stories that would curl your hair. There's so many things that have never been told about Amityville. For example, the kids are still going through stuff. They're still experiencing things. You talk to Chris, Danny, Missy, some of them, they're still having phenomenon that occurs to some of them in their homes and stuff. And we would talk about that stuff for hours, it seemed like. And I just recently went to California last week before last, to Los Angeles, out to Hollywood, and we filmed a documentary where I released some of that stuff, some of those interviews. And there's video footage in there, there's audio interviews, all that stuff. And they're putting it together for a documentary about the Amityville Horror. And so some of that stuff is finally going to come out and get some airplay. So I'm really excited about that. But we were really good friends. We'd go to conferences, and he knew that at every conference we went to, there was going to be a family there who was having something going on in their house, And I remember we were at the Broyhill Civic Center in North Carolina. And at the end of the thing, he would usually walk out in the lobby and sit there and talk to people, this and that. And there was a family who was sitting there, a mom, a dad, and a little 6-year-old girl, 5 or 6 years old. And they were just watching him real close. And I'm watching all the stuff going on. And finally, the dad pushes the little girl, nudges her to go up and say hi. George says hi to her, and she goes, hi. Hey, do the bad people ever go away? And that was her question to George. That question led to a meeting with the family where we found out what was happening. At that time, there's a lot of stuff going on, but at that time, something was coming into her room, opening her wardrobe drawers, grabbing her clothing out of the dresser drawer, and whatever it was would sit and hunched down in a corner, sniffing her clothes and cackling and talking to her. That kind of thing was going on. And that led to a 2-week investigation where he called Mary Downey, Mary Pascarella, who was she was the first investigator to go to Amityville, and George and I, and we stayed there for 2 weeks working with that family, trying to alleviate what was happening in their home. And we did that around the country. You may hear some dogs barking. That's my next door neighbor. Sorry.
That's okay.
But that's
what happened.
That was one of the benefits. Well, it was one of the benefits that happened from going to those conferences. We would meet families, and we would have an opportunity to talk to them, and work with families that were going through that. Eventually, they were able to alleviate what was happening. Mary Pascarella, who has now passed away, Mary Downey, was a phenomenal. She didn't call herself a psychic. She called herself a time walker, somebody who was able to look back into time and see things that had happened at a location before. And the three of us, we just went around the country. I have endless hours and hours of videotape of us working with families doing that. And you asked me about how to alleviate hauntings. Let's get into that a little bit. George was very patient explaining to me kind of how this stuff works, because I had the classic image, like, the Jason and Grant version of Ghost Hunters, where you go in, you declare a house haunted, you put some blinky lights in there. Yep. See that light? There's a ghost right there. See ya. And that was kind of the way that it went. And we had to, Trish and I went through a process along with my mom for several years of learning about negative energy, what creates it, what causes it, how it can collect and fester over time, what it can do to a personality, what it can do to spirit, what it can do to your core, your source, and how to, just like an addiction, like any other addiction, how to alleviate that, how to get away from using verbiage that perpetuates that, how to correct your behavioral system, how to eliminate and look at some of your programming and get rid of some of that earlier programming. I said so many times, I'm never going to be like my dad, and then I'll turn around and do something just like him. Programming has a lot to do with it. Finding your frequency, if that makes sense. What is it that resonates within you? And at the time, there wasn't a lot of good stuff coming up for us. So we had to look at all of that stuff. And Trish and George and a lot of people were involved in just supplying us with information, and a different way of looking, maybe through a different lens at things, and how to enter. George told me, the first thing he told me when I asked him, how do you get rid of this stuff? How do you get this crap out of your house? He says, well, you can start by getting a haircut. It's the first thing he told me. I had pretty long hair at the time. Yeah, right? And you think, well, what is that? What do you mean by that? But what he was telling me was, it's about your image. It's about what you think about yourself. It's how you view yourself in the mirror. And he was like, you know what? It's time to start tightening up, get a haircut, improve your appearance, make you like yourself, that kind of thing. One of the things Trish and I do together is, when we work with families, is we introduce the idea of journaling to them. We say, look, just whatever your thoughts are at the end of the day, write them down. And sometimes people can't put anything in there. They can't get anything positive. I have journals from kids that is just a pen going around and around in a circle on the page 100, 200 times. And maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, you'll get, I went outside for the first time today. I went out and I stood in the yard for the first time. Or something like, today I looked in the mirror and I thought I had pretty eyes. That kind of stuff. You get people there in such a negative space that just even the idea of that seems unusual to them. And so we start to introduce the idea of positive energy to them. Tools of empowerment. We give them stuff that they can put in their little toolkit that'll help them get back to a place of balance and center. I've often said, boy, if you want to change your life for the better, get a cat. Adopt a dog from the local rescue shelter.
Absolutely.
You want unconditional love? Oh my God, that's all you got to do. Get a cat, because they will love you until you're tired of it. That's for sure. Journaling. We talked about journaling, how to sit down and write out your thoughts so that it's clear and you can look at it and go, oh, there you are. That's where I'm at today. That kind of thing. Finding your frequency. When I say that, what I'm talking about is you have an energy source that you're connected to. You're absolutely connected to it. And sometimes there's so much noise and clutter, so much spin from the outside world that it's easy to lose yourself. And the only way that you can find that space, in my opinion, is through meditation, through prayer, through sitting in the stillness and allowing that to come through, finding friends that you resonate with. So many times we worry about pleasing other people so much that we lose ourselves in that. And so we recommend people, hey, if your house is going crazy and doors are banging and you're scared to be in there, invite a friend over, find your tribe. Go to somebody else's house. Just get out of there for a little while. What are you doing? Go to the movies. Find something that works for you. Humor. Oh my God. Trish and I, sometimes when we first started going out, we would sit in bed for hours and just laugh, in the early years of our relationship, and we still do it. We'll sit in bed. Sometimes it's hard to go to sleep because humor is such a gift. Laughter, that kind of thing, is so powerful in dispelling negative energy. We did a lot of, I don't want to say rituals, but ceremonies, house blessings. We tried to create sacred space in our home. We used singing bowls. If you've never heard of them, Google it. Singing bowls. You'll love them. That sound, that tone that comes from them just creates super powerful waves of positive energy that resonates through a house. Sage. What's that wood that they use? Palo Santo something. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but there's a type of wood, a sacred.
I know what one you mean. Yeah, I know.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It has such a beautiful smell. And the idea is that your prayers, your thoughts, and your creating positive energy resonates when you burn that. It goes out onto the smoke, into the house around you, that kind of thing. And so we do that a lot. Last night, what's today? Sunday? Yeah, last night I was over at a friend's house and we were smudging. Anything that brings in positive energy into the home is going to work. And hear me out there. If you're living in a house right now that you don't like, and there's stuff going on and you're frightened to sleep in it and something wonky is happening, look around and find where that dysfunction is coming from. It could be an addiction, alcohol, chemical. It could be a variety of things. It could be abuse going on in the home. It could be just, hey, I lost my job and I'm really scared and I don't know what's happening next. All of those kind of things. You have to be careful because a house takes on whatever the prevailing thoughts are that are inside of it. It takes that on. That house is yours and those walls have memory, man. So you have to, and it did for us. It took months of us having conversations with the house and blessings and ceremonies and bringing friends over and hanging pictures on the wall. My house is full of every tacky Walmart plaque you have ever seen out there that says live, love, laugh, fill your life with sunshine, peace to this home. I got them things everywhere in this house. I changed the colors of the walls. They were like this beige color. And we painted them blue because blue is a cool color for us. It helps me to relax and to just feel like I'm in my own space. Yeah. And so those are the things that we do.
This isn't the house that, because you went back to the house on the house, like I saw in the show.
The first house that we lived in, they only showed one house on that show. It was that 2-story house thing.
Yeah.
I bought that house. My dad built that house.
Yeah.
In 1983. That was the second house that we moved in that I told you about. When they did the show, it didn't translate well to show that we moved and all of that, so they just kind of blurred it all into one house. The first one was torn down and it was demolished. Eventually it got destroyed. The second house, remember I told you it sat abandoned for about 1.5 years, and
after
eventually
your mom moved in with you.
Yeah. Trish and I bought out my brother. We paid him. We took out a loan so that we could buy the house. Now we owned it. And you got to meet my wife. She's something else. She decided, you know what, this is our house. We're going to claim our space, and that's just the way it is. And brought me in on the idea, and we worked it. And all of the stuff that I'm talking to you about, all this positive energy reinforcement stuff, we applied it to the max. We got rid of everything in the house, sold everything. I kept a cedar chest that belonged to my dad, and I kept a ceramic rose that my mom had bought. And it's just beautiful. It's this thing is made out of ceramic. It looks so much like a beautiful rose. And that reminded me of my mom and her spirit. And so we kept that in the house. And there may be one or two other things, I don't know, but we sold as much of that stuff as we could. We went out and got all new stuff. We got things that remind us of our faith, of our humor, of our family. You know, I got signs all over the place that say dream, believe, spirit, achieve. If you come into my house, you would think it was Sesame Street. It's so funny. But that's my homework, you know, and that's what I do, because it's still tough for me sometimes to be in this house and have those memories, and you can get into a dark night over that, you know, and that depression can start to kick in. And then Trish comes along and says, you know what? No way. This ain't happening. And so that's what we did. It took 6 months before we could even get into this house. And when we came in, we still had bumps and bangs and things going on, but over time we've squashed it. And my house today is craziest place you've ever seen. We got kids running around, grandkids, dogs, cats. I got 7 cats. How many cats do we have, Trish? We have 7 cats in our house. You want to talk about crazy, but it's a good crazy. It's positive.
Tim,
and they love us and we love them. Go ahead.
I was going to say that Trish sounds like one badass chick, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And I think I saw on your website that she has published some books.
Oh.
She has. Trish is our associate pastor, our associate minister at Unity of the Palm Beaches, and she's also in charge of the children, the Sunday school, youth and family services there. And over the years, she really has a devotion to her church community, and she works with Unity Worldwide Ministries and just a global thing. There is, I'm going to out her for the first time in public. They have a book that's called The Daily Word, and it goes out around the globe in dozens of different languages and stuff. It's just really huge, and it's daily affirmation prayers and stuff, just a daily pick-me-up kind of thing, and she writes for that as well. But her love, first and foremost, is that of a mother and her kids and her furry kids and everybody she takes care of. She takes care of me. I couldn't find my socks in the morning without her. But she's written a series of books too. And one of them is The 5 Come Alive. And the idea is that there's 5 universal truths that are in all spiritual religions around the world. You find a religion, and these are the laws that usually govern it. Okay. 1, God is. 2, I am. 3, I pray. There is a law. I pray that law. I take inspired action, and I go through life. And it's beautifully worded. It's in a poem format for kids. She has written a number of children's books that are coming out now, and you can get her stuff at trishyancey.com. Yeah.
And Amazon as well.
She's over here laughing at me.
And I'm also going to add that Yancey is spelled E-Y. So Y-A-N-C-E-Y.
Yeah, it's Y-A-N-C-E-Y.
And I'm writing this down right now because I'm getting that book for sure.
I'm going to get it too. Because it's on Amazon as well. You can order it on Amazon.
You talk to him for a second? All right, so listen, I'm going to do this. Since you guys are talking about her book, I'm going to let her talk to you. Because she's sitting right here. All right, sit tight.
Oh, now I'm scared.
Oh, don't
Hi there, how are you?
Welcome. Nice to have you on the show. What an unexpected treat.
Well, this is supposed to be about him. I'm not sure how it turned into me.
You're a big part of his life, and you probably are the healing factor in his life, because it sounds like it was pretty hard up until he met you.
Well, he's had a rocky road, that's for sure. And I got to experience, I think, the tail end of that as we got together and things were happening and we were trying to combine households. But we've certainly tried to claim the good going forward, and a clarity and a sense of purpose.
Tell us what you thought. I mean, here you've met this guy, and we all get that feeling when we know we've got the guy that we like, the one we feel comfortable with. And then how long did it take for him to tell you kind of like about his malevolent haunting experience?
Well, what he may not have gone into with you guys is that we actually knew each other as friends for a good 20 years.
Oh, wow.
For a while of it as two different couples that hung out together. And then each of us had our, And then each of us had our relationships dissolve in time. And so I knew a lot about him, but even through all those years, he never said anything about that. And then when the time came for us to be together as a couple, it was about our fourth date, I think, or our third date, that he said, we have to have a conversation. And he said, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't really talk about, through all these years. And he, I think he was kind of trying to warn me away in the beginning. And he was just very certain. He said, this stuff has repercussions. And every time in my life I've reached for the light, I've kind of gotten knocked back down into the dark. And I just want you to know that, I don't know if you're down for this or, where you're at with this. And right from the beginning, there was never a question of me believing what he said. I absolutely believed what he said. It was more, however, of me saying to him, yeah, well, that's not the way my life works. So I get it. That's your history. That's where you've been. And if you're willing to let some of that go and stand firm and claim a new pattern, I'm here for you, and so it was a process. It took quite a while. We had his mom living with us for a while, and definitely things were happening in our house when she was in our house.
Wow.
Yeah. He said he told you a little bit about that, but yeah, there was definitely an energy that was carried and claimed by her that I always just thought was really, really sad, and wished better for her,
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think she was ever going to give herself permission to move out of that space. I think it was a kind of a life. She figured it was a life sentence for her, and she kind of claimed that. We had some conversation about that, her and I, before she passed. But yeah, it was just, I thought, well, I'm in for the duration, and I've had some interesting, fun and not so fun experiences since we've been together that have really shown me that, this stuff is real, and don't take it lightly, and to stand your ground and claim your space,
And is that you're having those experiences when you guys are doing your investigations?
Oh, yeah, during that time, during road trips and completely unrelated times.
Oh, wow.
I learned I learned about the Bell Witch by running right smack into the energy of it. And, that's the thing too. We come from such different backgrounds. I was never familiar with a lot of the horror films or the haunted stories I didn't live in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know a lot of these things until I kind of ran into them and found that, we kind of can feel those energies even into today, that kind of hang there. And Tim has said something all along that really has lived in me, which is, the same energy stays in a place until someone moves it. And it's really my initial comment to him of, yeah, well, my life's not like that, and that's not the way I'm going to go through it. I've definitely had to walk that talk and claim my own space because, this stuff is really very real, and it can have a real impact on your life, So.
Trish, I would love to hear just really briefly about the 5 Come Alive.
So the books that I've written so far, the 3 books that I have out are more about about the Unity spiritual movement and kind of teaching some basic teachings from that. I don't want to say religion because that's kind of a heavy way of putting it, but from that, the Unity community. I'm sorry?
Is dogma appropriate nomenclature?
Dogma is probably, we really don't have a lot of dogma, but these 5 principles are the kind of the foundations of the belief system that our spiritual communities embrace. And with teaching the youth, I had a lot of parents coming to me saying, yeah, I'd really love to talk about this stuff with my kids, but I don't know that I have words for it. I don't know that I can tell them what this belief system is all about. And it went from, everybody thinks, oh, well, somebody should do something about that. And it went from somebody should write a book or something about that to, well, maybe I'll give it a shot. And so it really is more about the unity, the 5 principles that Tim was talking about, which is, we believe maybe in a different way in what God is. We don't believe God is this super guy in the sky manipulating everyone. We believe that God is if you want to put it this way, the allness of beingness, for lack of a better way to put it, that God is everything. You're in it, you're breathing it, you're a part of it, you're a cell in the body, you're a wave in the ocean, all those different kinds of things. And so that's that first principle. The second principle is that we are a part of that allness. The third principle is that we're creating our life. A lot of people like to now call it, since that movie The Secret came out, they like to call it the law of mind action. And what that third principle is, and it's unity is kind of like science meshed with spirituality. It's the two of them coming together, and they call it practical Christianity or practical spirituality, because the third principle that we're kind of guided by is that there is this universal law at work. If you say you want to be rich and you walk around talking to everybody about how broke you are, what you're really putting out there is, I'm broke. And that's what you're going to get back.
Yeah. The universe can't differentiate.
Absolutely. The universe doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
The universe doesn't speak English. It speaks energy.
Yeah.
And if you are living at the energy of, I'm a victim, I deserve abuse, I'm broke, nobody loves me, my house is dysfunctional and my life sucks, well, that's kind of where you're going to be at. So that's
like
that
a manifestation.
Third. Absolutely. And unity is real big in that practical spirituality of, you are manifesting at the energy you vibrate at. That doesn't mean, that shit doesn't happen. Shit happens all the time. I mean, it really does. And stuff happens that we don't like all the time. Your power is in the mindset that you hold about what's happening and the actions that you take.
Exactly. How you react.
Yep.
To it.
So that's Unity's third principle. The fourth principle is that I connect with this allness of beingness, this source, this God that I'm a part of, by kind of going into prayer or meditative space, that heart connection to my source. And then the fifth principle is I take inspired action. I get my movements and my instruction from connecting with source, not from calling the next person that will sit there and gossip with me about how much life sucks. Because if I call that person and we talk all day about how much life sucks, and then I want to go home and manifest a great night, it's just not going to happen. I mean, that's provable. We can see that, and so I wrote that book so that adults would be able to have words to talk with their children about these 5 principles and where they come from. My second book was called The Heart of Prayer. In Unity, we don't do any praying like, oh God, please make the coronavirus go away and I'll never eat chocolate for the next 6 months. That's not the style. Yeah, that's not the style of prayer that Unity would espouse. They call it affirmative prayer. And it's kind of in line with that law of mind action, that I'm not asking you to save me from something. I am going within and I am saying, okay, I'm a part of God. I have the tools in here. If I just connect with that source energy, that divine mind, if you want to call it that, I can find the tools for the next best steps, and I take those steps. And so those are but that prayer, our prayer is in that mode. Doesn't matter whether you use words, whether you don't use words. It's all about kind of getting in touch with my connection to my source, my creator, my creative energy, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it God, some people don't, and so I wrote a book about that as well. And then my third one is the history of the Unity spiritual movement. But you'll find those there on the website. They're all softback, and they're thin little books. I try to make them easy with quick little tidbits that parents can use as talking points for kids. And I've been amused to find that a lot of Unity churches are using these in their adult classes because they're really written more toward a child's ear. But it's, I'm the goal was to help and I help be a bridge, and I think that's worked. So.
Well, I'm 46
but yeah,
years
that's
old and
them.
I'm trying it for myself.
Yeah.
Oh, well, good. And
But I want to know, is there an online community where we can hear, like, do you do like any kind of sermons that we can access, or you do?
Yes, we do. We do. There's unity.org is the parent organization of the Unity spiritual movement. And if you go to unity.org, there's all sorts of stuff there. There are communities, Unity communities all around the world, and that we're the parent mothership, we all jokingly call it, is in Kansas City, Missouri, or in Unity Village, Missouri. But if you go to unity.org, you'll find a lot of information about the history of the movement, and you'll find sources to where a Unity community might be in your area. I will tell you, it is a movement of nonconformists. So you will hear, every Unity community kind of has its own vibe. Some of them are what we jokingly call airy-fairy, because some of them get way out there in the ethers with, if you just rub a crystal on your forehead, your life will be great. And some of them are more Bible-based. So it just depends on the feel of the community. Our specific community is Unity of the Palm Beaches. And if you go to unitypalmbeach.org, that is our website, and we stream all of our services. When our minister's not there, I do the service, so you can hear me. I will apologize ahead of time for the video/audio quality. Sometimes it's not stellar, but we try our best. So, but yeah, you can hear kind of the vibe of the movement, if you will, and it's all very practical based. You know, like Tim and I have gone into so many houses with so many people, and I don't ever want to make anyone feel small, but there are so many people out there who insist upon being haunted, and no matter what you do for them or for their lives, a haunting, an unhealthy atmosphere, an addiction, or whatever is going to continue manifesting because of a mindset, much like his mom. I love his mom, and that poor woman, boy, nail her up to the cross because she was ready for it, and you could not take her off of it. She insisted that life sucks and then you die, and it was very painful to watch her go through that. And so you'll find over and over with the unity belief system that it's more about that, what you're drawing to yourself by the vibration that you put out there.
This is everything that you've said is absolutely parallel with what I believe. So everything, this whole unity spiritual movement really resonates with me. So I'm really excited to check this out.
Same here, and I think that this is the best time of all to be able to get the word out and get people on board with this, because
absolutely.
I don't need to say we're going through tough times, and I almost feel like this is divine intervention at this point.
Well, this was what I was trying to say like today, Marie. Like, you cannot give in to your fear. Change the way you think. Change how you feel. You know what I mean? Like, this,
and it's fascinating when we're talking about this time. So again, mindset. It's scary. Nobody wants to get sick. Nobody wants to die from this. And nobody wants to be completely ripped out of the life that they have created. And how fascinating is it if you can look at it from outside of ourselves for just a minute? We are like ants all over the surface of this planet, and we are trashing the planet, and our life expectancy is heading into the hundreds of years, and nothing is keeping us in check at all. How fascinating that these viruses are becoming superbugs to the point now that we're all asked to just, hole up in your house, and now we find the planet is healing while we're holed up in our houses.
In a matter of a week.
Isn't it right? In a matter of a week, exactly like you're saying. Isn't it fascinating? And I've seen out on Facebook, and it kind of makes me chuckle, but kind of a dark laugh, is everyone's saying, yeah, Mother Nature is saying, go to your effing room. What have you done? Yeah. Think about what you have done. Go take a time out. It's fascinating, and that again goes along with that unity belief system, and really it's what they would call new thought. We are only one of a variety of what you would call new thought religions or spiritual movements, because they're just a practical way. For me, it's where science meets spirituality, because we're looking for provable stuff. We're looking for things that say, if you do A, B, and C, this is what happens. We look at the Bible through a different lens. We look at the history of the Bible and when it was written and the practicality with which it was written, and we look through what they call a metaphysical lens, which is, that beyond physical. What are the symbols? What are we being asked to understand by what's written in the Bible or in other ancient writings and things like that? So it's a fascinating thing. But yeah, like you're saying, it's a scary time. And sadly, we have a public, a media, a government that just churns up the fear and goes, let's turn up the volume and scare the crap out of everybody, because we can keep everybody contained if we do that.
Yeah.
And if you can breathe through it and, Tim and I say this to people all the time. Okay, right this minute, we're okay. We have what we need right this minute. The minutes ahead of this one are going to work themselves out if we take practical measures in this one.
Perfectly said.
And
perfectly said. Perfectly said. No,
now that I've hijacked my husband's interview.
No, that was what you just did. Was you shared a tool with us.
Absolutely.
You just shared
It's important
with us. Hey, Marie?
Yeah,
Yes.
it is important.
We are okay right now.
Yeah, it's very important. You've been talking to Tim, who had a life. He grew up in hell. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. Both in our physical world and in the spiritual world, he grew up in hell. You don't have to wait to die to go to a heaven or a hell. We're creating it with every breath. And he's been to hell. So now he gets to use the tools of practical spirituality, or of him claiming that his life changes now and meaning it. That's the big thing. You got to mean it. We can say all these lovely words, and they're just words until you actually believe what you're saying and claim it. Nothing changes. You know, we've worked with haunting victims, and we've worked, like he said, I heard him say to you earlier, is, you know, something that a lot of haunting survivors have in common, not haunting victims, but survivors. It's fascinating to watch them all get together and discover what each of them did to grow beyond the haunting and to claim a life of balance. And that's important. We're creating it every minute. And that doesn't mean ignore everything. Don't act like there's no coronavirus and go running around hugging everybody right now. It's not the time.
No,
you know,
right.
we want to be practical with what's showing up. And at the same time, if you're haunted, if you're in an abusive relationship, if your life is out of whack and off center, these tools work. You know, we've said, I don't even care. I'll tell you right now, I really don't care if anyone who calls with a haunting is actually experiencing a documentable haunting. I could care less. And I know a lot of people, it's very important. So again, I don't mean to demean anyone, but to them it's very important, because that's the lens they're looking at it through. What I'm looking at it through is, I don't care if you honestly, truthfully, really have a ghost in your house. You can be the most haunted person in the world and never see a ghost. It's all spirit. It's all beyond what we can see. However we can manifest or document or videotape or audio tape, none of that means anything to me. The people in that home finding a place of center and claiming a life of wholeness and health, that's what matters to me. And I'm going to treat someone exactly the same, whether I think I can document a ghost in their house or not. That's not where my focus is. I'm more about gaining a life of center, because if you believe, especially in this energy type work, when we're at ease, when we're at center, anyone we talk to or touch in our lives then gets a little more towards center. And we're creating these waves of energy that are paranormal. They're coming out from us and you cannot see them, but watch how they affect a room and how that room affects every other room. You know, I mean, that's how we create the waves that change this world, because the world is all energy. It's all spirit, you know?
Absolutely, 100%.
What did I? Sorry.
That was amazing. That was amazing.
I guess.
If you take care of some of the sermons at your church, I have no doubt in my mind that your followers are just equally enthralled as we just were.
Well, and it's I'm totally passionate about it, because I've watched it work over and over and over and over again, and it really, we can create the change we want to see in this world just by what we embrace and what we put out there. There's a scary time right now, you know, and if we want it to change, we have to be the ones, person by person by person, with every little action we take that creates the waves of that change. And it's all paranormal, every bit of it. I don't care if it's a ghost. We all have energy that reaches out beyond our skin, and you know, that now they can measure.
Yeah.
So that's it. But I should really give the phone back to my husband at this point. Yeah. But yeah, you know, it's fine. Thank you. And, you know, I tell everybody, find your team, find your support system, and talk to men like my husband, because they're smart.
I cannot thank you.
Stop.
I cannot thank you for coming enough. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. If you ever have any questions, give us a holla.
Oh, you'll hear from me.
Oh yeah, we will. We will.
Okay.
That's what we do.
Here's Tim again. Hold on, here he is.
Didn't I tell you?
Fabulous.
I love her. I love her. She's amazing.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I married her.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yes, sir.
I can't.
Round of applause.
Yeah, I definitely married up.
Facebook.
She's somebody who can, in the space of 3 or 4 minutes of talking to you, totally make the goosebumps pop up.
She you
did. And
Don't
she
lie.
says things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
She knows how to word things in ways that somebody who barely got out of high school like me, it makes sense to, and it has a ring of truth to it,
Yep.
And so,
Well, she just,
pretty cool,
she
huh?
just gave me an incredible tool. I'm going to use this because everybody at my work is stressing out. We work at a law firm. They're still making us come in. I'm in Canada. And often people come to me, and I was just told the other day, like, you're the strongest one, you can't fall apart. And when she said to me just now, when she said, okay, this is what we say is, we're okay right now. And that's what gave me goosebumps, because she's right. That's
when you align with
We're
thoughts
okay
like
right
that, and you get away from the fear. And it's like I said, there's so many outside sources that are swirling around us that can make you lose your way. Next thing you know, you're buying 40 rolls of toilet paper. You have no idea why.
Yeah.
It's toilet paper. This is a good idea. Well, what's that going to do for a virus?
Getting caught up in the madness,
but
right?
fear-based scenarios, and that's what we talked about in these haunting things. It's the same energy that comes in. More bangings, more rappings, more tappings. It keeps you in the spin of things. We call it hell in the hallway. And they say when when one door closes, another one opens, but in the meantime, there's hell in the hallway. So it's kind of where we're at as a society right now, almost globally, I think. And I'm just glad that I was smart enough to marry up. And we had a conversation today. We were talking about situations and relationships and things like that. I said, you ain't never got to worry about me leaving, because I know when I'm in a good place, I'm staying right here. You're gonna have to drag me out.
Yeah.
So
you guys are like the power couple.
Yeah. She's amazing.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
We have spent years working at it, because it's like she said, I've had a tough life. Everybody's had a tough life, maybe a little more than others. I don't know. But there's a programming that comes with that. And, it's hard to break those rhythms, those grooves that have been burned into you sometimes. And I struggle with that a lot. I am just as comfortable on the dark side of life as I am on the light side of life. And it bugs Trish when I say that, but it's,
it's your reality.
Well, because you know the dark side of life, Tim, and you had no choice but to be comfortable there, or you would have had to live your whole life uncomfortable. So
sure, I can use that.
Yeah.
I can remember stuff my dad did to me, and I can use that very effectively on other people. That's psychological power play, that psychological bullying that he did. And so I'm no joke, I have to work on that kind of stuff. That's why my house is blue. That's why I got the cheap Walmart stickers on the wall, those kind of things, because those are constant reminders everywhere I look. Hey, keep yourself in check, buddy.
They're talismans against the negativity. But it sounds also like she set some pretty healthy boundaries, because she said you are ready to move on with that and have a good life, then let's do it. So that to me was yet another incredible thing that she this is a wise woman.
Yeah, and she told you that we had met 20 years earlier, and if we had gotten together back then, we'd have blown each other up. There's no way that would have worked. So, everything has its place and its right time, divine timing, I guess you could call it, that we both had cleared our plates, so to speak, and found ourselves in a place where, hey, guess what? This is happening, and it was really cool, and life has been great. And We learn from each other. We laugh from each other every day. Those are the tools that we talked about. You asked me how to alleviate this stuff. You don't allow it a space for it to be. Negative energy will sit and it'll fester until something comes along to displace it. And when Trish walks into the room, boy, you better look out.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. I have no doubt in my mind about that.
So, Tim, when the show you recently filmed, what channel do we need to keep our eyes peeled on again for?
You know what? I have no idea. I wish I could tell you. The clapboard that they were using, where they go action and they click that board, it said Shock Docs on it. So I don't know.
But you don't know if it's travel or sci-fi.
I signed a waiver that said it allows Discovery Networks to use the footage.
Oh, so it sounds like
and so it's something that, yeah, and it's from a company called 1895 Films. They brought us out to California. We got to run around Hollywood for a week, and they did interviews with us, and it's about the Amityville Horror. They wanted to...
With the newly
released They brought in the coolest people. Yes, they had Laura DiDeo there, who was worked at the news agency that was there at the time. She was there during the seances
that we interviewed
Ed and Lorraine Warren did with Mary Pascal.
I'm actually friends with Laura.
She's awesome.
We had her I love Laura too. She's amazing.
Yeah, Marvin Scott.
Get to see her?
They did. Did I get what?
Did you get to see Laura?
Yeah.
I did not, because they staggered our interviews and stuff. Eric Walters was there. He was the guy behind My Amityville Horror that did the shows with Danny Lutz, did the movie with him. They brought the best man at George and Kathy's wedding. He was there, the guy that George used to build motorcycles with. So I'm really excited about what it's going to be. It's a look at, I'm guessing, based on the questions they asked me, that it's more about who was the family and what did they experience and how did they feel about it. And, so it's going to be a really good look at this. They asked questions I had never been asked before in years. And so I'm excited about it. I will put information up on my under construction website as I get it, and people can check in there.
And what is that website?
Okay, I have to explain this first. See, Trish and I have really enjoyed the last few years. We kind of stepped out of the paranormal because I've had some health issues. We're working on our house. We're doing all kinds of stuff, and we kind of got out of the paranormal a little bit. I did not want to get back into this with the thought of, we're going to make a spooky, scary, creepy documentary. We're going to run around with blinky lights and EMF meters and prove the existence of ghosts. We've done all that. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. So the thought behind the new website, and it's funny you guys called and arranged all of this because it's only been the last few days I've been working on it. The title is Zen for Primates. And I just love that title, Zen for Primates. And so the idea behind it is, rather than talking about ghosts and the scary stuff that happens, why don't we create a space for people to come and experience all that stuff that we've been talking about, to have classes that you can go into, online classes about creating sacred space, a call to prayer support every Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m. We'll be online and we'll be there to pray with you and to talk with you about anything you want to talk about, those kind of things. And so that's going to be at timyancey.com. And I'm excited. I'm just now starting to build it. It's a mess. Please don't look at it give me a couple of days. Okay. But one of the things we're going to do is we're going to put some live online classes on there, and I'm sure Trish will be involved in that. I have some of our chaplains at Unity that are going to be involved in that. We're going to talk about hauntings. We're going to talk about paranormal phenomenon, UFOs, aliens, Bigfoots, but we're also going to talk about achieving spiritual calmness, about aligning in divine source. We're going to look at those things through those lenses too. So that'll be coming up. And I'm I'm going to put George's film up that we did. Just before George passed away, we talked about putting together a presentation. It's a 28-minute video. It has personal photos from George's collection that he gave me that have never been seen. And it's him. It's not me telling you what happened in Amityville. It's George Lutz. And it's his voice and his narration talking about what you see in the photos, what happened in the house, the things that happened. And it's the first time he's ever been able, publicly, at least on social media, to tell his story. You know, it's not a movie. It's not creative license. It's not a book. It's George. And so that'll be coming up too.
Looking forward to it, man. This has been such an impactful conversation with both you and Trish. For me, and I think for a lot of our listeners, I think also for Kari. I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you. We got to do this more often than every 7-10 years.
I know, right?
And I think, right? Yeah. And I haven't done an interview in a long time. To be honest with you, a radio interview. It's been a long time, and so it's been fun for us to do. You have to get Trish on as a guest because she will blow your mind.
Yeah, I want to.
And you know, yeah, she'll take you down lanes and roads and paths that you didn't even think about.
I'm going to add her on Facebook if that's okay, and then that way I'll be able to keep in touch with her and just let her know. Okay, great, because I really do want to have her on.
And then maybe after the show airs, the Amityville show airs, we'll have you back on to talk about. Then we can talk about it, right? And the website will be launched by then too, and we can talk about that. So there's a lot of exciting things happening. So at the end of the show, but because of the nature of the subject, to protect our guests, ourselves, and our listeners, I always say a quick prayer. I'm going to do that right now. The light of God surrounds us.
Let's do it.
The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us.
The power of God protects us.
The presence
of God watches over us.
Wherever we are.
Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.
Amen.
Well, we both know that prayer. Look at that. That's the prayer for protection, and I use that everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining in. That was fabulous.
Hey, listen. I got to tell you, that was written by James Dillon Freeman, and he's a Unity guy.
Are you serious?
And that prayer actually went to the moon. Yeah, that's a Unity guy.
I just got goosebumps again. This is too crazy. All right. Well, thanks to everybody.
Love you guys. Yeah. Thank you very much. Have us on again.
Thank you so much. Thank everybody for tuning in. Everybody, do what the government says. Stay home. Be well. And we will...
Wash your hands. Don't give in to fear. Meditate.
And
find that happy, joyful place because you are okay right now.
And we'll talk
until
the next episode. Stay healthy.